Hello everyone, my name is Cherie, and in this video I will be reviewing the screenplays that received the nomination for Best Original Screenplay for movies released in 2021, and that was for the 94th Academy Awards. I am a little late in getting this out because we are just 2 days away from the announcements for the 95th Academy Awards. The main reason was I've been putting this off because I didn't enjoy the script that received the Oscar. And so I just didn't want to talk about it. But, I'm trying to make this an annual series, video series, and I got to talk about it. So let's get into it. The recipient of the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for films released in 2021 was Belfast by Kenneth Branagh. The other nominees were Don't Look Up by Adam McKay, King Richard by Zach Baylin, Licorice Pizza by Paul Thomas Anderson, and Worst Person in the World by Joachim Trier and Eskil Vogt. The last two that I mentioned, Licorice Pizza and Worst Person in the World, were not available to read online. So I was not able to read those, hence I will not be reviewing them. Not really sure why Licorice Pizza wasn't released, but Worst Person in the World was a Norwegian film, and I don't know, maybe they just didn't want to do the English translation or something. It's rare for a non-English language film to win Best Original Screenplay. However, it has happened 6 times before. The 1944 film Marie Louise was from Switzerland. The 1956 film The Red Balloon was from France, and you can find that on YouTube. It's about an hour-long, charming film if you haven't seen it, The Red Balloon. 1961's Divorce Italian Style was from Italy, and 1966's A Man and a Woman was from France again. 2002, Talk to Her. A little problematic, but that was from Spain. And then 2019's Parasite from North Korea. Now that one did have an English language version available that anyone could read online. So, I guess maybe they were figuring they were going to win, so they did the translation, and maybe, I don't know, the Worst Person in the World, they didn't think they would. I don't know. Anyway, so let's get into the scripts and what I thought of them. Belfast. There were a lot of things that the script did that are things that people are trained not to do when they're learning how to write a script. However, I've said this many times before, if you're also directing the screenplay, you can write it however you want. So Kenneth Branagh wrote and directed Belfast. But here are the things that were done that you are typically supposed to stay away from. First off, the font was not Courier 12. And I don't know if this is a British film thing, because last year's Promising Young Woman, I believe, also wasn't Courier 12, and maybe that's just an American standard. But whatever font it was not easy to read. I did not like the font. There were bold titles and captions, but it didn't say, title, Belfast, caption, 15th of August, 1969. It was just put on the page, and I guess you were just supposed to know, that meant that goes on screen as a caption. The scene headings didn't include dashes, which normally you would have like exterior street dash day. But there weren't any in Belfast. Also, you're supposed to put day or night. Belfast did stuff like early morning. I've seen stuff like sunset, sunrise, but in general, you're just supposed to stick to day and night. There were cut tos. So it's a transition that appears on the right side of the script. Cut to, cut to, cut to. But, basically every time you go to a new scene, it's like you're cutting to it. So those are redundant, and those don't need to be in scripts. We here the whole we thing, like we hear a sound in the distance. Just put, a gunshot rings out. You don't have to put we hear a gunshot ring out. We rise up over a wall. That's kind of giving camera directions within your script. Again, he wrote it, so he can do that. But in general, don't do that. There was a sentence that said, "It is so hot." In your action blocks, you're supposed to show, not tell. So saying "it is so hot" doesn't mean anything. That's like an empty sentence in the script. You could put the sun blazes in the sky, so you got a shot of the sun. A bead of sweat drips down his neck. So, those kind of things indicate that it is so hot. But "it is so hot" is not descriptive at all of what you're supposed to be seeing on the screen. A lot of to be verbs. The carriages are being dragged. There is movement. Buddy is entirely ignored. Just stay away from the to be verbs when you're writing. Interior Catholic house day. So that was the scene heading. Like, how do you know it's a Catholic house? Instead of, I would have put interior house day, and then on the wall is Catholic memorabilia or something like that to indicate that it's a Catholic house. But just saying interior Catholic house day doesn't really say how you know it's a Catholic house. The story was based around the Troubles in Ireland. Now, me having an American education means that I didn't know what they were. I probably read one sentence about it in a history book, a long, long time ago. But it wasn't familiar enough to me to understand what was going on, like why there was this fighting. And once I read the script, so I'd seen the movie, and then when I read the script, I understood it a little more, but I actually had to do some, Wikipedia research basically to understand that it was just, Catholics and Protestants fighting each other. So there was a voiceover on a TV in the background saying, "Small numbers of Catholics still peacefully living in Protestant areas were targeted." So that's kind of how you knew what was going on, but that it was so quick. And again, Americans with American educations, we're just not going to get it. There was this whole scene about back taxes and the mother paying them and then getting mad that they didn't send her a thank you for paying off her taxes. And so she sent them a note about that. And then they gave her, found more taxes that were owed. And that whole thing just didn't make sense to me. It was really kind of odd. And if that really happened, that's really bizarre. A lot of the scenes seem to build and lead up to something, but then there's this anticlimactic release. And it was kind of very keep calm and carry on type attitude. But, that's just not dramatic writing. That's not, I found it boring. It was very talky, like a play, which makes sense because Kenneth Branagh was a stage actor, Shakespearean stage actor. But, if you've been watching these, you know that I don't really like movies that are based on plays or are play-like, dialogue heavy. And then there was the question of who is the protagonist. The way it's set up, the protagonist is Buddy, the 9-year-old kid, because we're seeing everything from his point of view. However, Buddy, doesn't have agency. I mean, he's a young kid, and he can't really do anything about the Troubles. He kind of gets pulled into things by other people, but he's very passive protagonist. And that is also something that you're supposed to stay away from when you're writing scripts. You could say maybe the mother is the protagonist, but again, it's, everything is through Buddy's eyes. So I just think you got a passive protagonist in Belfast. In general, when I was reading it, I would have to stop every 10 pages and then start back up the next day. I could not get through it all in one sitting. I found it just really boring, and it was episodic. I'm not a huge fan of episodic. When it's like a space film or an action adventure film, yeah, episodic can work, but in general, I like things to, start and then things progress from that thing and they keep going and then you've got your end and it's more linear. And Belfast was not that. Also, have to say, Licorice Pizza and Worst Person in the World were also very episodic movies. So anyway, so that's my wrap up on Belfast and what I thought. Don't Look Up. This, in Save the Cat parlance, is a dude with a problem type script, or dudes, because you had two protagonists. It was such a fun read. It was such a fun watch. I watched Don't Look Up 3 times, and I would watch it again. I mean, it's just, I love that movie. It's got memorable characters. All of them are just very distinct, and I love that. The script itself was 157 pages, which is really long. That would equal 2 hours and 37 minutes on screen. However, the movie running time was 2 hours and 25 minutes with credits. So somewhere in there, they lost 15 pages worth of stuff, or it was just snappy and really fast, quick dialogue, quick editing, that would kind of get the page count, or the time, the running time down from the page count. There was a little extra bit in the intro that was in the script that wasn't in the movie, which I felt was actually better to have gotten rid of that. So that was cut out, I know. But other than that, I'm not really sure what was cut out. Act 2 might seem a little long for some people, but I loved it. I thought it was really well written. The only issue, formatting issue I noticed was that sometimes there were the occasional extra paragraph spaces between action blocks, which is something that I can find in my scripts as well. It's like if you don't, return something the right way, then you get extra paragraph spacings. But other than that, I just didn't notice anything. Nothing stood out to me, all those things that stood out to me in Belfast. So I would definitely recommend reading this one if you're looking for a good script to read. And the story itself, it's all the well-known beats. You've got the inciting incident where the comet is discovered that is on a direct trajectory to hit Earth and cause an extinction-level event. You've got the refusal of the call by the president, the Oval Office. They don't take the threat seriously. You've got the break into Act 2 where the two scientists, Kate and Randall, leak the story to the press so that they can get it out there so it's not hidden anymore. So that leads into the second act. You've got the midpoint false victory where the president is launching a project to strike and divert the comet with nuclear weapons, which ends up not happening. You've got the break into Act 3, which is after the strike doesn't happen, the scientists campaign for people to just look up so they can see the comet in the sky because everyone's calling it fake news and they don't believe that there actually is a comet. It's just, I love it. I love it. I loved it so much. So definitely read and watch Don't Look Up. And the final film is King Richard. Save the Cat parlance, this is a full triumphant story. Now, this was interesting. There were 2 drafts available online. The first draft and the final draft. So I read them both and I compared them. And this is how good a screenwriter Zach Baylin is. And he's the only one that didn't write and direct the film. He's just the lone screenwriter only of the bunch. Anyway, the first draft was 122 pages. The final draft was 124 pages. And they just really sync up really well. So, that's what you want. You just want to understand story beats that well and have just a really tight script. And not a lot was changed. They are both good scripts, but the final draft is just a little better. It was cleaned up. The formatting was corrected. There were the double spacing between scenes as opposed to single spaces, which the first draft had. There was some fat deleted, unnecessary scenes. There were some flashbacks to Richard's childhood in the past, which are gone. He talks about it to his daughters instead of the movie showing us, the actual flashback of him in the past. And there was one really significant change, which I'm glad they changed. In the first draft, Richard chased and shot at the gang members. He was very aggressive, and he did use the gun. In the final draft, he has the intention, but he doesn't. And I just think that that was a really good idea that they did that. So the major beats lined up really well in both drafts. In the first draft, Venus and Serena are introduced on page 3. The final draft, they're introduced on page 5. They go into the new world of having a tennis coach on page 30 in the first draft, and then page 28 in the final draft. Venus wins a juniors trophy on page 44 in the first, and then that's page 49 in the final. Richard declines the offer of an agent on page 62 in the first draft and page 65 in the final draft. They move to Florida to train at the tennis academy on page 78 in both drafts. Richard sees Capriati's mugshot on page 89 in the first draft and in page 92 on the final draft. And then Venus tells Richard that she is ready to play on page 97 of the first draft and page 100 of the final draft. So really, really well lined up, really tight, great script. I loved this. Had I been a voting member of the Academy, I probably would have voted for King Richard. It's an exemplary script of what you want in a Hollywood blockbuster type script. So anyway, I completely recommend King Richard as well as Don't Look Up. And that's it for this video. And hopefully it won't take me so long to get to the next one for the 95th Academy Award nominees. Hopefully they will all be available for me to read online. So anyway, thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.